Vanakkam, friends. This is ARRM Arun. I am President of the Southern India Chamber of Commerce and Industry, SICCI. On behalf of SICCI, we take great pleasure in welcoming our esteemed guest of today, Mr. Vijay Amirtharaj. I'm sure he needs no introduction, but still we will continue with the formalities and share a few words about him in the course of time. He is well known to all of us for a very long period of time. On behalf of SICCI, we would also like to extend a warm welcome to each one of you for joining today's program. A good number of you will be aware that SICCI has completed 111 years of service to industry, government and society. During these years, we have conducted several programs of interest to each one of our stakeholders. Invariably, the guests who attend our programs address us just for about 15 to 20 minutes of their time and restrict their addresses to only the areas of expertise. We, however, felt that our guests have much more to offer than just the area of expertise. We felt that our guests can share with us their all-round path to success, their inputs for the next generation, their inputs for society, and there are several things that we can gain from each one of these heavy accomplishers. That is how we came up with the concept of SICCI 360. Today is the 23rd session of SICCI 360. We started this program in October of 2020 and we have completed 22 successful sessions. We're extremely glad that today is our 23rd session. I'm sure all of you will be aware that in October of 2020 was perhaps the ongoing pandemic, perhaps even the peak of it. And we wanted to innovate as a chamber, and that's how we came up with the concept of SICCI 360. Each program has been different. Of course, the guests have been different, but even the format has differed slightly in the course of time. Today is the first time, if you believe it or not, that we are having a fully on-site event. So there is no online part of it. Of course, it's always with a live audience. But today is the first one that we're not having an online session and we decided to have fully on-site. So it's been interesting to that extent where SICCI 360 has continued to innovate with time. As I was saying, SICCI 360 is a recent foray for us, building on the experience of our seminars. Actually, before I continue with the rest of my slide that you see in front of you, I don't need to say that now because this is fully on-site. The name SICCI 360 is something that we thought of as a branding to give a multidimensional perspective to the kind of discussions that we have with these programs. We orient these programs to be lively discussions with our eminent guests, and each one of our guests are experts in their fields who share with us their all-round path to excellence. We have a stringent criteria for inviting our guests to this program. We look for guests with over 4 decades of experience in their respective fields of work, and also guests who have contributed to society's development. This, of course, is a political platform as well. The format that we have for SICCI 360 is that we have 5 sections that we go over. We first start with our guests' expertise. We then start with our guests' organization and their role within the organization. Third, we get into our guests' career path. Fourth, we get into our guests' inputs for the next generation. And finally, we get into our guests' inputs for society. We certainly encourage you, the audience, to participate along with us. We're extremely glad that we have a good student population with us today, both from SICCI Chennai as well as Rajalakshmi Engineering College Chennai. We're very glad that you could join us and certainly look forward to your participation with us. We just have 2 guidelines to follow. We want to make sure that our guest is at comfort at all points of time. So all our questions are oriented in such a way that our guest likes the kind of questions and comes back whenever we would like to invite them. And secondly, we would like you, the audience, to gain out of your participation with us. So if any of you have any question that you feel is not answered during the course of this program, please feel free to connect with the SICCI team and they will be glad to moderate your questions so that they can feed it to me for answering in the course of the program. With that, I would now like to share a few words about our esteemed guest for today, Mr. Vijay Amirtharaj. He was born in 1953 in Chennai, very much a Chennai lad, if I can say, and today resides in Southern California. He's been the first ever Indian tennis superstar who used his fame to promote the game both within our country as well as globally. After playing his first Grand Prix event in 1970 achieved first success in the singles event in 1973. He reached the career high world singles ranking of number 16 in July 1980. He's got a career win record of 384 matches, winning 16 singles titles and 13 doubles titles. After his playing career, he's been an active Indian sports commentator. He's been lead anchor and host for the ESPN Star Sports channel since 1991. He's also pursued his acting career, best known for his film Octopussy in 1983 as an MI6 intelligence operative. I for sure look forward to being able to discuss that in the course of today's program. He's also appeared in Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, also been a regular character in the NBC TV series The Last Passage and the Yakov Smirnov. He founded the Vijay Amirtharaj Foundation to provide education and life skills to several sections of society, whether it be blind women, shelter and healthcare for abandoned elderly, children in slums, surgeries to destitute villagers, and so on. He's been awarded the Padma Shri in 1983, and he's also received the International Tennis Hall of Fame and International Tennis Federation honored, and these honors were given to him towards his contributions to tennis and were given to him in London. With these few words, I would again like to welcome our esteemed guest for today, Mr. Vijay Amirtharaj. Mr. Amirtharaj, vanakkam. எப்படி இருக்கீங்க?
Thank you. Nice to see Arun. That was a pretty long resume that you read out there.
I hope it's accurate.
Almost.
You're free to correct.
But it was very good. You pulled a lot off of the internet, I think. But it looks pretty impressive, especially if you're talking about someone else. But it's great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here this afternoon rather, for this event and to meet so many lovely students here. I think really are the future of any country, and especially ours, because we are the youngest country in the world with the youngest demographics. So I'm delighted that so many students are here, so many of my friends, and Ali, thank you as well for inviting me to being and spending this afternoon with you. I think there's a lot that we can talk about, but I think the most important thing is to be able to address all of our input to the students at large here, because they truly are our future and what they're going to be able to take to in the coming decades. And when I look at the youngsters in India, I always feel that the country is in good hands.
Before we get started, how many of you here play tennis? Just about a few. And how many of you watch tennis? Oh, a lot more than that. That's good to know. That's very encouraging, I'm sure. So let's get started right into it. You've been known for your particular style of game of volleying and shot selections. They say that it gets associated with high IQ. Is that correct? Did you consciously go after it?
I would probably say exactly the opposite.
Which on the shot selection or the IQ part?
The IQ part, yes, absolutely. But I think the important thing in sport, especially in our sport, is to be able to tailor your game depending on the opponent you play. There is one way you like to play. I like to serve and get in. I was a big guy. I like to move and cover the net well. I played on a faster court. Was more useful to the way I played. But at the end of the day, it depends also against whom you're playing. Unlike golf, where you're playing the course and by yourself. So I think the good comparison here is to be able to actually get to the net, make a volley, and put the ball away, because I was a big guy at the net. It was harder to pass me when I moved well. And so yes, it really helped me attack more. I'd like to play very aggressive tennis, even if I was missing quite a few. In the long run, it paid off.
How many of you here know about the tennis products that Chennai has produced? Have you heard of any of them? Who?
Vijay, Ashok, Ramesh Krishnan, Ramnath.
So Chennai has produced several names in the tennis field. When you look at all over India, whether it's Ramanathan Krishnan, Ramesh Krishnan, yourself and your brothers, and more recently Ramkumar, he's now India #1. Has there been anything that's contributed to Chennai's success in terms of producing the only known names in tennis for our country? And what do you think needs to be done to nurture this going forward?
I think the key element here is family. I think the one in Krishnan's case, way back when Ramanathan was playing before me in the 60s, his father was instrumental in making him a tennis player. And thereafter I came along, and then of course my story is documented. It's entirely been because of my parents, especially my mother, who was a really dominant force in tennis as far as our family is concerned, but also thereafter we passed out as well. But I think the important aspect here is that it really came down to how emphatic the family was, and literally put everything in the kitchen sink behind the child who was playing, and making sure with the deficiencies that he or she might have had, that they were going to make it in this particular sport. I think today, the issues we have are, there's a long list of issues that we have today, but I think the important aspect is that you're not going to become a champion overnight. You're going to press yourself into sacrifice, into hard work, into giving up friends, into literally giving up holidays, giving up movies, giving up anything that would be normal for a teenager to do, and focus on something where there is no guarantee of success. The reason why sport is such a difficult element of business is simply because there is absolutely no guarantee you're going to do well. You may become a good tennis player, but that doesn't mean you're going to win. You might win a few small matches, but you might not win the big ones, which make the difference. So I think the fact is that you must throw everything you can at it and give up everything else that you desire to have even a small element of chance of success.
So commitment becomes very important to that extent.
Commitment becomes a huge issue. Sacrifice becomes a huge issue. Financial requirements becomes a huge issue. And needless to say, the ability to compete amongst players who are better than you is another issue. So it's a combination of all of these things, along with fitness and diet and physios and things like that. But that comes alongside the aspect of actually working on the sport.
When we look at what distinguishes the best tennis players from the rest, would you say that it's these qualities that you've spoken about, or is there anything else that these tennis players have which makes them excel for a good period of time?
It is the basis of becoming a good athlete or a good tennis player. But I think even more than that is what's between the ears. The thing that I've learned most about myself in tennis is really learning about yourself, what you're capable of doing, and how you can push the envelope to issues that you never thought you had in you. And you're pushed into a corner and you think you're not able to overcome a challenge. We've always said that, as the great Billie Jean King said, every challenge is an opportunity, and pressure is a privilege. And when you end up playing for the country, there are very few who have been given that privilege. But the pressure is a lot. There are over 1 billion people cheering you on to win. So there is no option but to win. And obviously you're in deep trouble because of injury, because of fever, because of all kinds of issues that you're attacked with as you enter those matches, and then you're down 2 sets to love, or you're down 2 sets to 1, or you're down with bad calls, or you're just having a bad day at the office. And now how do you pull yourself out of that? The ability to win when you're playing badly is what makes you a great champion.
In a country like India, a cricket-crazed nation, do you think other sports have perhaps taken a back seat compared to cricket? Or do you think that every sport is being looked at equally?
Well, cricket, first of all, in India is not a sport, it's a religion. So we take cricket out of the equation. And then we kind of put all the other sports in a basket. And I always thought, frankly speaking, that soccer would be number one. Because it's the simplest game to play. Globally, it's the world's number one sport, soccer. And amazingly, the world's number 2 sport is tennis. It's a global sport. With all due respect, there are lots of other sports that are played in very few countries. I can give you a long list of names on that too. But even in the US, we talk about the World Series in baseball. The World Series in baseball is between San Francisco and LA. I always have this argument with these guys. Please don't call it the World Series, because it isn't. The Super Bowl of American football is between Dallas and New York. Nobody else participated. The Davis Cup has 192 nations playing in it. Every country at the UN participates in the Davis Cup. FIFA World Cup in soccer, it has a global participation. With all due respect, in lots of the other sports that we all know about, there are 12, maybe 14 countries that participate, of which the ones that really count are about 4. So it's difficult to call it, in my humble opinion, the World Cup.
How many of you here are aware of James Bond? Or rather, let me rephrase the question. How many of you here are not aware of James Bond? So everybody here is aware of James Bond, so that's good to know. How did that come about from tennis, an active tennis career, and then moving on to commentating and getting involved and continuing to be involved in the game? How did you get involved with movies and being an MI6 operator in a James Bond movie?
I think it came upon very suddenly, to be honest. I was playing the quarterfinals at Wimbledon in London, and they were getting ready to film this picture a year and a half away, and they always make these preparations well ahead of time. And the producer was there watching me play this quarterfinal match, and asked if I could have tea with them after the match, which I did. And he said that they'd tested over 400 actors for the role, and they hadn't come up with the right person from their perspective. And have you done any acting, and could you do a screen test? So my first initial reaction was, this is a Bond picture, so you've got to do it. But the most important part was, not very many people can say they worked at Pinewood Studios in the morning and played at Wimbledon in the afternoon.
Certainly not.
I always worry Roger Federer about it, because even he didn't do it. So we have a good time talking about it, but the most important thing is that it challenged me to do something else which I was not fully aware of, and obviously didn't know if I would be good at it. So when they got me into it, it taught me even more about what challenges film makes from the time an idea and a concept is put into a screenplay or an outline or a treatment, and then into a screenplay before it actually gets to the screen. There's such a long way to go, and the success of a picture automatically starts when you're actually able to translate a script into a movie, and then we all go see it on the screen. That itself is a huge success.
Will we continue seeing you in the movies or streaming platforms?
Well, the few movies that I've done, they've killed me in it. So I'm just trying to find a script I don't have to die in. As soon as I find that, I'll do it.
Well, we wish you the best on that.
Thank you.
We now move on to the second section of today's program. This is on our guest organization and the role within the organization. The first question is going to be asked by one of our senior committee members, Mr. A.L. Chidambaram from the audience. Mr. Chidambaram, please go ahead.
Good evening.
How do you see yesteryear players careers with present day players careers in terms of professional advancement and prospects?
So I think if you look back at our sport over the last 40, 50 years, you see there's been an incredible change that has taken place. When I left India to play overseas for the first time, to the UK, we were allowed to take £3 with us, $8. And that's what you had in your pocket to go overseas. And so we had to win in the afternoon to be able to eat at night. So I remained very thin at that time. But today, that's not the case. Today, there's a lot more opportunities, there's a lot more sponsorship available, there's a whole ton of television involved. But at the same time, there's also more competition. But what has changed over the last 40 years, since I went overseas for the first time, is the fact that we've started to slowly believe that sport can be a profession. People used to ask us when we were going in the early years, they used to ask my parents, oh yes, what do your boys play tennis, what do they do for a living? We had no answer for it till I won my first big tournament and made more money in 1 week than most people make in a whole year. So then they stopped asking that question after I won my first tournament. But my late grandmother used to always say to me, why do you have to go so far to lose? You travel so far and then you lose. You can lose here only. But that question I could never answer. But I think the important changes in the game itself have made a big difference to where we are. It's become more physical today in a short span of time. When we were playing, all the matches were best of 5 sets. All tournaments were best of 5 sets. Today, only the Grand Slams are best of 5 sets. So you have to be good in the short term, in a sprint, as opposed to a marathon. But the good news today is, if you see our Ramkumars and Vishnuvardhans and all the boys of today's generation, they're all big, they're all tall, they're 6'3", 6'4". So height is not an impediment anymore. In those days, I was one of the tallest players in the tour alongside Stan Smith and so on, so it helped me with the big serve. But the game has changed. Motivation should continue to change with it. But there's a lot more opportunities. But when we played, my parents were flying blind. They didn't know where tennis was going to take you. Today, you can Google anything and find out where you're going. So it's a big difference.
Every sport is grueling. If you take a look at cricket, yes, perhaps it's not as much. There are 11 guys on the field and everybody is contributing to some form or the other, but they have to be fit. They have to take care of their fitness. But individual sports like tennis, even though you have doubles options in tennis perhaps is a very grueling sport. And on top of a number of games that you have to play, you have to travel a lot and meet the various schedules that needs to be met. In the process, you get injured. You've had your fair share of injuries and surgeries as well. What is your advice to any sports, developing sports enthusiast who needs to balance all of this and continue going forward?
Well, within your career itself, it depends on the individual because everyone has different physical attributes and physical fitness routines. So there's certain things that was comfortable for me might not have been comfortable for the next player. On the other hand, you are going to have injuries because you're putting your body through something that it's not used to. And irrespective of how much you train and we ran 8-10 miles a day to be able to last marathon 5-set matches, which helped you. But at the end of the day, it catches up with you somewhere along the way. So the important aspect of this is to be able to balance both very carefully. And today, you have a lot more physios, you have a lot more to do with diet, you have a lot more to do with training facilities, you have a lot more to actually train the muscles that you use only for tennis. Not if you're a runner, not if you're doing some other sport. It is especially for tennis, you can actually do something that is quite specific. So the way you can train, that's why Federer is able to play for so long. They don't play doubles, they only play singles. The reason you play tennis is because you want to be the next Federer, you want to be the next Nadal, you want to be the next Djokovic or Murray, and you want to be the best singles player that you can possibly be. Nobody starts the game to play doubles. Nobody starts the game to play mixed doubles. So I think the important aspect that we need to focus on here today in our country, in our sport, in both men and women, is the fact that we need to focus on something that puts us back into the Davis Cup, where we belong for the country, and back into the Fed Cup, where we belong for the country. When we were playing, we were the #1 country in Asia by a long shot. Today we're not in the top 5. So there's a lot of work to do in those areas.
Actually, that's working out very well in cricket, because in cricket, there's a lot of attention given to domestic cricket. And that's where we see quite a lot of the boys and girls blossoming and then moving on to the national team.
Yes.
I completely agree with you. Davis Cup is a very good starting point. Now, we've had several names in tennis in India. Chennai's had his fair share, as we spoke about it. We've also had people like Sania Mirza, we've had Leander Paige, we've had, Mahesh Bhupathi also perhaps is from here. But we've not had names that have really done well in Grand Slams, whether, at the scale of Roger Federer or anybody else to that extent. Is there any reason why we don't do well in these Grand Slams? What do we need to do to create the next Roger Federer within us?
Sorry to say, we're not going to get to Roger Federer, but I think the important thing is we haven't been able to have anyone play in the Grand Slams over the last 20 years consistently. Which means we have to be ranked at least in the world's top 100 to get in. And we haven't had that on a regular basis. This is where the concern is. And I think the important aspect here is what we talked about earlier, where there needs to be such a ludicrously strong commitment from the athlete first, and then be able to throw in things that you don't have, and pull things from within you that you thought you didn't have, and then have that bit of divine intervention that can make you the kind of player that you need to be. The problem we have here is that the risk element is so high that we're not willing to take that risk. You go to school, you go to college, hopefully you get a job, and you move on. If you play for 5 years, it might not get you anywhere. So that's a very heavy risk you're taking with your whole life. So if you ask a young family of 4 with small children, listen, let's not let these kids don't go to school, let them not go to college or anything else. Let's put them into, both of them into tennis or table tennis or something else. And let that be their profession. I wonder how many families would say yes. Give it all up and let's take a risk with both your children to see if they're going to be able to make it. I'm not quite sure one person put the hand up. That's the hard part in it because it is riskier than the riskiest startup someone could invest in.
So do you feel they are doing this in other countries, which is why there are people who are blossoming?
Absolutely.
And we are not doing it within India?
Absolutely. We're doing it across the board. A Spanish Davis Cup captain once asked me, how come you don't have any good tennis players coming out of India? And my immediate answer was the same reason you don't have any software engineers coming out of Spain. They don't. If we're going to outsource for software, you're going to Bangalore or Chennai. If you want a tennis academy to go practicing, you're going to Barcelona. The 100th tennis player in Spain can beat Nadal if he has a slightly bad day. So the depth within Spanish tennis is so strong that even without Nadal, Federer, and the top guys, they can still win the Davis Cup. And that's where we have to try and focus.
There are several technology tools that I'm sure quite a lot of you would be familiar with, whether it is data analytics or artificial intelligence. There are several of these tools. And in some of the games, cricket for sure, they're using these tools to improve player performance. Mm-hmm. Is that used in tennis? Is that useful as well in the process?
Yes, but again, it's as much data that you can intake. For example, if I was playing against you and I knew that you had a better backhand or you had a better forehand or you served well in a particular spot in the box, that data is going to come in very handy to me because the go-to serve for you would be the wide one to my forehand. So on the big points of 40-15 or 15-40 or 30-odd, that's where you're going to go subconsciously. So that helps me a little bit because of percentages. But other than that, on that particular day, it comes down to really how you address your own game into the opponent that you're playing. It's a lot different.
Which comes in through experience and practice alone.
Yes, and very strong mental toughness. Mental toughness in sport is critical. What you do at 30, 40, 4, 5 is a lot different than what you do at 1-0.
You are president of the TNTA, the Tamil Nadu Tennis Association, and in that capacity you signed with the Tamil Nadu government to start the International Women's Tournament here,
yes.
250. What are plans for international tennis tournaments in Tamil Nadu going forward? And do you think Tamil Nadu, Chennai have, especially after hosting the Chess Olympiad and now hosting this event next month, is Chennai now on the global map for international tournaments?
Well, from a tennis perspective, we've had the Chennai Open ATP 250 for about 18 years. And it was a great success. It did really well. And then moved on to Pune. And for 5 years, we haven't really had a major tennis event in the city. And so we're very excited that the WTA 250 starts on September 12th, next month rather, for 7 days. And brings about 60 international players to the city. And we have a few of our both Chennai girls as well as the number 1 and 2 in the country who are going to be playing in it in this women's tournament. First time a women's tournament is being held in Chennai, so we're very excited about that. But what it does is it inspires people to think that I can also do what they're doing. And all of them are making a good living from it. And traveling the world, which has been my greatest education. It has taught me more about people, it has taught me more about geography, it has taught me more about history of cities, and meeting people that you never thought I would meet. So it is, in my opinion, to play a sport at a high level, if you can get there, is the greatest education one could have. It teaches you more about everything else, but most importantly, more about yourself and what you need to ask of yourself. So we're very proud about the fact that the WTA 250 is in Chennai this coming month. We encourage everyone to come be a part of it, take a look, see how good it is, and how good these girls are, and what good athletes they are when they play against each other.
We incidentally are also sharing a few pictures that we found of you, of course some from the internet. And if you feel that you'd like to share a few words about any of these pictures, please feel free to go about it. We've already shared, I think, about 3 or 4, and we have another 3 or 4 coming by. Our next question is about the Amirtharaj Foundation. You started it some time ago. What are its aims and accomplishments?
So this came about in 2006 because I had served the UN for 7 years, nearly 7 years, as a messenger of peace for the then Secretary General Kofi Annan. He appointed myself and Muhammad Ali and Luciano Pavarotti and Michael Douglas, the actor, and Elie Wiesel, the Nobel laureate. He appointed 5 of us as messengers of peace for the UN, and I went to places that I wouldn't normally go to, whether it was Bosnia or northern Sri Lanka, to Thailand and Aceh after the tsunami, and seeing the amazing work that the UN agencies do when tragedy strikes. And what they're able to do with a cell phone and a bottle of water is just unimaginable. And it really opened your eyes to not being in New York or London or Paris or Rome. And they were able to make a difference and put people back in their lifestyle again, which is practically impossible to do. And they were the ones doing the work on the ground, irrespective of the budgets. And so when my term was over with the UN, nearly 7 years, I decided we'd start with a bunch of friends, this foundation, to help make a difference in the lives of people who maybe don't have the ability to raise money and awareness for their programs. And so the foundation is based in the US, and we only support charities in India. So we're spread out in 10 states and over 15 causes. And 95% of them are women and children related issues, and 5% of them are old age homes and mentally challenged individuals.
This is a very good effort. You've got global prominence and utilizing it for such an extent where you assist society, contribute back to society. A wonderful effort. I think we should give him a very good hand. We now move on to the third section, which is on your career path. You've spoken about your coach, you've spoken about your parents when we were talking earlier, and a few questions on that. Your coach was Mr. Ramarao, and he spotted the talent in you. What kind of a coach-student relationship did you have, and what distinguishes best coaches from the others?
I think initially when you're starting the game, you need someone to be able to guide you with the right fundamentals. If you start with the right fundamentals, the chance of improvement is greater. If you don't, then you're going to have to pull back at some point in your career and start tweaking and changing things. As we say, it's easier to build a home from scratch than it is if you've already built that and now you're trying to make changes in it. So it's the same thing with our sport. And so I'm very fortunate to have someone who's very strong on fundamentals to start with. So the forehand, backhand, serve, volley were all designed by him very quickly, and we mastered that. We did 6 months on what he called the tennis clock with no tennis ball. So we had to go and swing the racket for an hour every day in front of him with no ball. Tell that to a 9-year-old kid, what chance you have of him staying there for 1 hour trying to stroke, make the strokes with no ball. It was a tennis clock. And so it it was unimaginable that he would want to stay with you to do that. Needless to say, my mother was instrumental in getting my older brother Anand into it first by actually buying him a toy every time he went and did it. So it's a little car or a little chocolate. That's what he got if he went and did the clock for 1 hour every day. And he did it only for the clock and only for the car. So I think we got into it, Anand got into it first, needless to say. And he was absolutely a brilliant student. He always came first in class. His exams, he could look at the paper and tell you the paper. In mathematics, he would know the answer first and work back to the question. He was just one of those guys who was superb in school. And then, unfortunately for my parents, I came along after that. And I was exactly the opposite. So I was unhealthy growing up, so my mother often went to school and took notes and would come and teach me in the hospital. And then she would do the homework with me every night. And if there was a test the next day, she would literally study with me for the test. And everybody in the house knew about the test except me. And it happened time and time again, and every time there was a test the next day, I got 102 fever the day before. So it was one of those things where she spent more time. I always make a joke of it because I always feel that with one set of school fees, both my mother and I were educated. Because we spent about the same time in class. But on the other hand, her indication is not wanting me to be left behind, and the fact that she had to put more of an effort into what I had to do from a health perspective and from an education perspective, and to be able to catch up with Anand was a very important factor for her. And Ramarao had the same feeling about me. When I had tested positive for TB at the time, when I was lying in bed, he would say to me very specifically that you have got something that is going to make you great in this sport. And he's kind of instilled that in me even when I was lying in bed. So you have a coach who's able to encourage and inspire you, even though he was not an international player. He had a very strong illness with diabetes. He was very, very strong. And he knew he was going to die at some point soon, but he said he would make me India's #1 before he passed away. And he did, 3 months later. So you need people like that who can inspire you and also encourage you to be able to live up to those expectations.
Our next question is from the audience. This is from a student, Ms. K.R. Varshini. Is she among us?
Hi.
Varshini is doing her third year biotech
Yes.
at SICCI. Please go ahead, Varshini.
Hello sir, I am Varshini. So my question is, you have 5 important D's for you: desire, discipline, determination, dedication, and divine. Sorry for that.
Yes?
So could you please elaborate on that?
Sure. So, from a sports perspective, it is fairly clear as to the things that you need to be able to work at. We all know work ethic is important. We know that sacrifice is important. But the first and most important thing is if you have the desire. If you don't have the desire to do something, then don't even bother doing it. It cannot become a chore. It cannot become a job. It cannot become something, you feel like you have to do. So I think from that perspective, the desire is key. To start off, I want to do this. I want to do this either in sport or in movies or in art or in music or whatever it might be. So desire is key. Once you have that desire, now you're going to have to fuel that desire with the 3 other D's, which is the dedication that you have to put into it, the determination to overcome failure, because you're going to learn more from failure than you will from success, and needless to say, the discipline that you need to go into it. In an athlete, I love to eat Indian food 3 times a day. Now, you got to avoid it. So there's an element of sacrifice right off the bat. The aspect of saying you're coming back tired, but you still have to run another 5 miles for that evening. So there are sacrifices that you have to make, and to fuel the desire, you needed to have that determination, discipline, and dedication to be able to actually get there. So once you do all of these 4 Ds, still, at the end of the day, whether you're in business, whether you're creating a product, whether you pull the marketing and tech team together to be able to sell the product, and you get into sales, but you still need that divine intervention from above to be able to push you over the top. So unless the man upstairs is on your side, you're not going to really make it work. So I played a lot of close matches which I've lost, which I should have won, and I played a lot of matches which I should have won and then I lost. So it works both ways. And the question is, at one point in time, do you look at the cup half full? I've always looked at the cup half full. I've never looked at the cup half empty.
Continuing on the point of being gentlemanly, how many of you here have heard of John McEnroe? Come on, don't feel shy. Okay, so can any of you tell me what he is known for? Bullying. The reason why I decided to bring in John McEnroe here is as part of the overall research process of finding out more information about our guests and deciding what we want to talk to our guests about. One of our team members referred to quite a lot of the previous interviews that you had done. And one of the older interviews was before the fact that you had beaten John McEnroe. So I sent Mr. Amirtharaj one of the questions, the draft questions, saying that how is it that John McEnroe was the only guy that you've not beaten in the men's top 10? And then he immediately replied back to me saying that he's beaten John McEnroe twice. So then he immediately modified that question and took it out. Thank you for the correction. But I decided to keep it because certainly, whether it's him or there's also another gentleman who used to play with him. Can any of you tell me who it was? No? Equally vocal as John McEnroe. None of you are able to remember?
They're all less than half his age.
That was Jimmy Connors. Jimmy Connors was the other guy who used to lose his temper as well. And we find losing temper not just on the tennis court, in various sports there. How do you learn to manage your emotions when you play?
For me, I thought, first of all, for me it was just nature. It was not, I was not trying to not get angry or whatever. It was just the way I am. For me, I think anger is such a negative aspect of one's individuality because it takes more out of me than actually making me feel better. In certain cases, when you release your anger, you release your emotion, you feel better. And then if that's the way you are, then that's what you should do. But for me, if I got upset, it just made me upset for 10 days. It just took too much out of me to get upset. So the easiest thing to do was let it go and not be upset. And so I moved on with that, and that's generally the way I am in life. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, it just happens to be the individual, and each individual is different. McEnroe played one way, Bob played one way, I played one way, Connors played one way, and so on and so forth. And you see these three guys in men's tennis today, Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, all of them have very decent temperaments. And, someone asked me the other day, what's wrong with men's tennis? I said, that what's wrong with men's tennis is we've got three nice guys at the top. So I think those things matter a lot depending on your individuality.
What has been your best moment on any tennis court? And also, who are the mentors that you have learned from?
Well, in tennis there have been several, but I would have to say certainly my teacher, my mentor, needless to say my parents first and foremost, because I've always said my greatest talent was being born with the right parents. So they did 98% of what I am is entirely them. I just happen to be the one in the family. But so for me, they were everything that I wanted to be as an individual. And hopefully they instilled enough in me to make that less work to be like them. And so from that perspective, they've always been my mentors. From a tennis perspective, the person I wanted to emulate was the great Pancho Gonzalez. Even you might not know the name, but he was already in his late 30s, early 40s when I actually got a chance to meet him and play with him, and then he eventually coached me for 3 years. So that was a unique opportunity where it made the difference between winning and losing. One year I was number one in India, and the following year I was in the world's top 10, only because of his coaching. And that made a huge difference. He literally instilled in me the ability to win, which is a hard thing to do. You can always teach someone to play good tennis, but it is very difficult to teach someone to win. And so he had that between his ears that he was able to translate. And his communication skills were not the best, but I happened to relate to it. And personality-wise, he was exactly the opposite. He got angry at everything he saw. But it made a huge difference in instilling. If I talked to him for 30 minutes on the phone, I would play better.
Thankfully, you never picked that up.
That's exactly. He was excellent.
Our next question is from another member of the audience, Mrs. Minnie Maynard.
Okay, Minnie, be nice. Right behind you. Right behind you.
Vijay, when you decided to lay down your tennis racket, did you have a concrete plan on your future in this next phase of your life? Because very often, most players just walk into the sunset. But in your case, you've hit headline news for decades. So did you have a concrete plan on how you are going to remain relevant after your retirement from tennis?
That's an excellent question for any ex-athlete in any sport. It's a very relevant question, because we know that in sport, a career can end tomorrow morning because of an injury, irrespective of the sport. So there's always that great danger. I was very fortunate to have played as long as I did. But when it came to my early 30s, and I was contemplating the aspect of retirement, I was getting about 1,000 letters a week telling me not to quit from people from around the world. And those letters were so touching and inspiring that you work just that bit harder to be able to continue playing. So I probably played for 3 or 4, 5 more years than I maybe should have, but I did. And at that point, having a young family as well. But during the course of my 25 years of playing on the tour, I always felt that I was living in an unreal world. I was hoping that nobody would wake me up, because I was having a magnificent dream for 25 years. And it was going so well, even on the days that I lost. Because I was doing something I loved to such an extent, with great passion and hard work, that not just me had put in, that my parents had put in, my coach had put in, and that took me to places I never dreamt I would go. So for me, it was more than a dream come true, and then also making a profession out of it, where I was being paid a lot of money to do that. So that is such a rare opportunity that I didn't want to wake up from. But when my time came to be retired, those 25 years came in very handy, because all through that portion of my life, I always felt I needed to prepare for what was going to be real after I was 35. And so to a great extent, I went from that, I went to broadcasting, I went to movie making, I went to a lot of other things that helped me do with brands and so on and so forth, that gave me an opportunity to understand what the world really was in the world of business. And to me, that was a great education. And the analogy that I always drew came from tennis. Because tennis was clear. You play well, you win, you play badly, you lose. And it was so important every single time, and every single arrangement that I made with anyone in work or business, my analogy was always tennis. And that's where I always am so grateful every day to my parents, because they made that difference of my understanding what it was, not just to play a sport, but to be able to also compare it to real life. So, thank you for that.
We now move on to the fourth section, which is your inputs for the next generation. How many of you have heard about this tennis player named Jennifer Capriati? She's from Spain as well, if I'm not mistaken.
American.
She's American. Her father, Stefano Capriati,
Yeah.
he quoted that nobody becomes a champion without their father or mother struggling at the beginning of their child's career. And today when you look at an Indian parent Rightfully so, an Indian parent always wants their child, girl or boy, to be able to ensure that they get a good education, because the education is what is going to take you forward at any point of your life. So even those who are in sports and have a passion for sports have to be able to balance their education and take it forward in such a way that both go hand in hand. Of course, your parents also played a significant role in your career. How should parents these days encourage this balance to their children in order to choose sports as a career? And the other side as well, what would you encourage children who want to get into tennis? What is your advice for them to continue this balance?
You know, there is no simple answer to the question. The important thing is, we all know that parents are going to do everything possible within their realm, whatever is good for the child, at any age. So, even putting a child through school and college is such a tall order. And with everything, with rising costs, with a whole slew of issues that we can name, it takes a lot out of them to be able to do that. And they're going to do that, and they're going to work extra hours so that the children can do better. Quite normal, it's across the board. To be able to add something as a sport to it makes it a near miracle. But there are some who are willing to go that extra mile. The thing that makes the difference today is what I would love to share with youngsters of today, is that if you're able to do above average in a particular sport in your school years, above average in a particular sport, by the time you leave high school, then you have a very good opportunity to get into the best colleges in any part of the world, because you have a sport to back up your academics. So, the common example that I've used is my first son, who at 8 years old told me he wanted to be a tennis player. He was playing tennis and basketball at 8 years old, and he wanted to pick one. He chose tennis, which I said was stupid, but he still wanted to play tennis. So he did.
Why was it stupid?
Well, because we know what we went through all the way through. So I said to him, at 8 years old, there's good news and bad news. The good news is I'm your father. The bad news is I'm your father. So for an 8-year-old, he actually understood quite a bit. So he wanted me to coach him. So I said I will, because I knew his passion for the game. His desire was there. He was sacrificing everything else. His friends, his movies, his playing with them, and all of that, just to be able to practice more tennis. So we played in the under 8s, he played in the under 10s, he played in the under 12s, under 14s. He never won anything. So my wife said to me that maybe you should get him a proper coach. So I said, no, I think he's getting better. All his friends were ranked in the top 10, and he was not in the top 150. So finally, when he was 16 years old, I went to the dean of the school he was in, and I said, I think I would like to take him to Asia to play some junior tournaments. And if you don't mind, if you can give him some exemption from his homework for 6 or 7 weeks. So at this point, the dean thought I was not very well. But I took him on the trip anyway, and for the 6 or 7 weeks, he lost in the first round every week. On Monday morning, he was out of every tournament. So when he came back, he was doing his homework, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then playing tennis, and then going to school. So he had not won anything. And at 17 years old, 16 and a half years old, I decided that he was not getting enough time on the tennis court. So I decided for the last 2 years of his schooling, I was going to take him out of school and put him in homeschool, which is a common factor to finish school. At this point, my wife definitely thought I wasn't taking my medication. So I went to the dean of the school and I said, I'm really sorry, but I'm really going to have to take my son out of school. And now he thought that, I wasn't well at all. Sally Ride, he said to me, Sally Ride, the first woman in space, American woman in space, had gone to the same school and she didn't pull out. And you're taking this boy out. He has to apply to 60 colleges before he can get into a college. How can you take him out of the school, this prestigious institution? Anyway, I took him out, unlike any Indian, and he finished his home school. And at 17 years old, he became the first ever ethnic and the only ever ethnic to win the American Junior Championships. And 72 hours later, he got 52 scholarships across the US.
So were you taking your medication or not?
Well, then, all of a sudden they thought I was the best coach in town. So things changed because the guy became a good tester. He also got 3-4 months choice of picking any subject matter that he wanted to study in any college ahead of people who were getting 4.5 GPAs in academics. The reason I say that, I'm not saying choose between one or the other. I'm just saying that to play a sport along with the academics is going to help you in the long run to get into colleges even if you don't make it to tennis.
Absolutely. I think that's a very well said statement. That's very, very important. And that's what talks about balance. That's so very important for both parents as well as children. So continuing with parenting and continuing with children, you have stated in the past, quote, "My biggest achievement is that my kids call me twice a day," unquote. How do you manage to stay connected with the next generation, even in the midst of your multiple global engagements?
When we were growing up, when Anand, Ashok and I were growing up, I was the tech expert in my family. I was the one who was doing all the things that came along in my day 40, 50 years ago as to what we could find. Today, I'm desperately trying to understand what the boys talk about. And they, as you know, they talk a different language. And so to keep up with them, I have to be educated by them. I learn more from them than they learn from me, needless to say, as we all do from our children at this age. It all started, I think, from the time they were, literally when they were old enough to be taken to the restaurant at 2 years old, and spending time with them all the way through when they could start talking properly, and talking complete and utter nonsense, and listening to them through that nonsense. And we were very fortunate to be able to spend that much time together. Every time I traveled and came back, that relationship kind of remained, I think, to some extent. But more than anything else, it's just a question of spending time with the children. For me, it was my break, and to be able to learn from them. So, fortunately today, with the communications that we have, and the tech stuff that they put me through, that we're able to speak morning and evening, irrespective of which part of the world we're in.
The spending time is not just a parent spending time with the child, it's also the child spending time with the parent, which is equally important. Frequently, people just look at it from a one-way point of view where only the parent has to spend the time with the child, but there is so much that the child can also learn from the parent. So it's a mutual process that has to be encouraged at every point of time. Our next question is from the audience. This is from a gentleman, Mr. Christy Matthews. There are two things that I would like to share about Mr. Christy Matthews. Number one is that, as I told you, we've had 22 sessions so far, and today is our 23rd session. So Mr. Christy Matthews is one of the few people who've attended every session of ours without missing anything at all.
Oh, wow.
And the second thing that I would like to share about Mr. Christy Matthews is that he's my classmate. So we both went to the same school that Mr. Amirtharaj also graduated from, which was Don Bosco in Egmore. So glad to be able to talk about this in this platform. Christy, please go ahead.
Good evening. Sometimes successes and sponsorships change people. How can players keep head firmly on shoulders and feet firmly on the ground? That is my question.
Success in sponsorships, is it?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes, yes.
Success can be actually termed in a variety of ways, and frankly, for me and hopefully the boys as well, as they keep continuing to do what they're doing. The success, as Arun rightly pointed out, is being able to honestly talk to them every day. That's the greatest gift of all. But often we think we deserve more than we need, and I think it's where you come from and what's instilled in you at a younger age by this town, this city, my parents' friends. I think the time we spent at that time was strongly instilled in us at a young age, and hopefully that'll stay with us and translate also to the children as they get older and older. So there's a big difference between need and want, as we all know. And if you're able to stay focused on what we need and how we may be able to make a difference to the next person's life, that's the greatest gift of all. And that's, I think, frankly speaking, that's what I term success.
Thank you.
We now move on to the final section of today's conversation, your inputs for society. But before that, is there anybody in the audience who would like to ask a question of Mr. Amirtharaj? Please. You can introduce yourself.
Hi sir, good evening. I am Sanjeev and I am a professional cricketer. So I can find a little bit of connect which you are telling this interview. And my question is, some critics says that you have been too gentlemanly and lack the killer instinct. So what's your thought about it, and what's the importance like being a gentleman in the game, as sir asked? And my second question is, how do you handle failures?
How do you handle failures?
Yeah.
Well, the first part of your question has always been more of a, honestly, the right word is looking at it with a bit of a laugh, because, it's very difficult to say to this day, which is a fact, to this day, the Asian tennis player with the most number of ATP Tour titles to this day, from the time tennis went open in 1968, is still me. And for that to happen, I needed to have a whole lot of killer instinct for me to be able to win that many titles. So whether I did it with a smile or with a knife, it's the same thing. And the most important thing is for me that, as I said earlier, it had to be some degree of originality from the way I was, the way I was brought up, and so on and so forth. It didn't change anything from your overwhelming desire to win. That is the art of killer instinct, where when the guy is down, you put him out, rather than waiting for him to get up again. So that came literally from my ability to close out matches when you're ahead. That's the big feeling about killer instinct. Killer instinct can be seen in a variety of ways. You call it that just because the guy shows that so he has a fist up in the air, or he, whatever the physical attributes are. But the most important thing is Stefan Edberg was a killer on the court. Nicest guy in the world. Stefan Edberg. He won 6 Grand Slams, as you probably know. So I think when you look at that, there's a big difference from the way people end up winning a match when they're up, which is where you really need the killer instinct. The second part of the question is a little bit more difficult for each individual. But how do you handle failure is an important aspect. You tend to learn more from failure than you do from success. When you win a match in tennis on Monday, the next match you play on Tuesday or on Wednesday. Whereas you don't think of the match that you finished. Whereas when you lose a match on Monday, you wonder, how did I lose to that guy? You go back and you analyze and analyze and analyze. If I play that guy again, I don't want to lose. I cannot afford to lose that guy second time. And a lot of guys have beat me 2 and 3 and 4 times before I finally beat them. And you have to work an extra hard because you're paying more attention to it. The greatest story about failure was Abraham Lincoln. He lost every election that he participated in till he won the American presidency. So you learn, to a great extent, learn a lot more from failure than you do from success. That doesn't mean you need success to be inspired more, but you do need to be able to learn from it. And I think in any sport, that's the case. Whether it's in cricket, whether it's in anything else, when you're out there, you have to be able to perform under pressure. And how do you do that under pressure? I think those are the key elements. So I think failure, honestly, I think it teaches you more.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sanjeev.
We today see a sustained attention on the part of every government in India, whether it's the central government or state governments, in order to be able to improve the sport, or any sport for that matter. What are your suggestions? Let's say if you're given a choice of 3 suggestions to be able to improve the status of tennis within Chennai, within Tamil Nadu, within India. What do you think that the government should do? What do you think chambers like SICCI should do? What do you think that society at large should do?
Well, first of all, I think the wind has changed. I think states are doing a lot more in sports than they ever did, because they're starting to see the value from it. They're starting to see that sport is clean, it's pure, it is universal, it has no sense of religion, it has no sense of color, it has no sense of ethnicity, and it doesn't matter where you're from. It's only a question of how good you are, how fast you can run, how high you can jump, and how much better you can get to be in a sport. So the good news about that, it's clean and it's pure, and so you can focus on it and use that to the benefit of a state or a country. That's number one. So if they pay attention to it, and within our 30 states in the country, and the languages and the dialects and religions and all of that, we can focus on sport. What it's going to do, it's really going to enhance the state to a great extent. Not just for the players who are playing it, but also for attention to show what the state can achieve, and what we can do in business, and what we can do with FDI coming in, what we can do with joint ventures, what we can do with collaboration. All of it can be focused in through the element of sport, irrespective of what sport it is. If you're in car racing, you can sell more tires. If you're in bicycles, South America is looking to buy them. There's a lot of things that you can do through a particular attachment to sport. That is the first thing. The combination of all the states competing against one another is also going to improve the level of sport in the country. This wasn't the case 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Today that's available. So I think we are creating more stadiums. I think Tamil Nadu government is doing a majestic job in being able to address this issue, not just by having the chess championships and our WTA tournament, but more importantly, to be able to invest money in cities and districts around the state where they're actually building mini stadiums and they're creating academies for all sports. So not everyone is going to be a Federer or a Usain Bolt or a Serena Williams, but what is going to make a difference is that they are going to be healthy, they are going to be fitter, they're going to be happier because of that. It's going to translate into families, and sport to a great extent brings families together, it brings communities together, it brings people together to be able to spend time with friends rather than just hanging out and potentially not using that valuable time for something that can help you physically. So even health is the most important aspect of playing a sport. It has done wonders for me. I was very ill as a child growing up. It turned me into something that I never dreamt I would be. But more than anything else, even today, if I don't feel well, the only thing that gets me better is just going out and playing tennis for 45 minutes. I have all kinds of injuries, but I still play and I feel better. So from a sporting perspective, that is a key element for any age group of person. As I was saying the other day, my father played singles at age 85. And the only reason he finally stopped playing is my mother got upset with him. So he had to stop playing. So what I'm saying is that each state is doing a lot now and starting to pick up even more. And I think in the final analysis, it's going to benefit the country.
Another question before we end. This is on the diaspora. The Tamil diaspora is today worldwide. We span more than 40 countries today. And our government here has been very, very keen to be able to extend its reach into the diaspora as well. because they find it as a way of being able to bring in economic development into the state, make sure that the Tamil culture does well, whether it's culture, whether it is language, whether it is music, whether it is arts. SICCI in particular has been very involved with that. SICCI has been partnering with the Tamil Nadu government to run this program called Yadu Moore, where we reach out to the Tamil diaspora globally. So we conducted an online session where we had more than 40 countries participating across 400 different associations and chambers of commerce of Tamil origin. What would you say is the effective way for us to be connected to the diaspora in such a way that there is further development within our state?
I think again interaction, as you rightly pointed out, of being able to have physical interaction, again through sport, through art, through music, through communication, that would make a huge difference. I attended one of our major Tamil events in Dallas recently, where I was the keynote speaker, but the important aspect there for them as well was wanting to interact with the Tamil population in different parts of the world, and physical interaction. And the easiest way to do that is honestly through the art of culture, music, and sport. So that's an important factor. The one thing where, in my opinion, SICCI and the business community can help with sport is to eliminate the element of risk for the athlete. I gave this white paper to the government many, 10, 15 years ago about saying that the one issue that is the riskiest of all is in sport is if you put your life to it, that you don't quite make it. And what does that mean, don't quite make it? You know, the fact that you didn't become a professional athlete and you're earning very well from it. So if you take 10 kids, boys and girls, and let's say 2 of them actually ended up being on the world tour, and the other 8 did not, can the other 8 be protected with jobs somewhere across the country or somewhere across the state? Those things are very important to be able to then encourage the child, boy or girl, to invest their entire life into a passion with the talent to be able to become world beaters. Those things can make a huge difference to the safety net underneath the athlete.
Very good. We can take one more question from the audience before we close. Anybody would like to ask a question? Please. We have 2 hands there. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Sunil. I finished my animation course. I'm interested in sports and all. I'm doing my gym. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in tennis and all. I'm doing my working in my dad's office. I'm interested in very sports and all, carom board and shuttle and all. That's all. Thank you.
Oh, that's pretty good. You do animation, is it?
Yes.
Excellent.
So if you can ask questions rather, is there a question that you want to ask?
No.
Tennis, but injuries are something all athletes deal with.
Yes.
So how do you manage injuries? From a physical point of view,
Yes.
as well as the mental stress.
Aspect of it, yeah, excellent question. That is the real bane of an athlete. You know, one way or the other, you're going to get hurt. And you think that even if you overcome the injuries, you think you're fine. Actually, you're not. Because when you get to be my age, most of the time I cannot even sleep on a bed because my back is so bad. So I go to hotels in different parts of the world and I sleep on the floor because that's what's better for my back. So you don't realize it at the time when you're playing, and you do more and more and more to make it worse and worse and worse because you're lengthening your career. So yes, you're absolutely right. Every athlete is going to face an injury issue. You just hope you can manage it at the time when you're good enough to win. Because there is nothing in the world that I've done in my entire life that has spanned a whole slew of stuff that even comes close to winning a tennis match. It's always been for my own self my greatest accomplishment from within. And when you win that tennis match for the country, because the flag is on your back and the anthem is being sung, there is nothing greater in life that I've ever achieved. Accomplishment from within. And when you win that tennis match for the country, because the flag is on your back and the anthem is being sung, there is nothing greater in life that I've ever achieved. So I think to answer your question, it is serious to have these injuries. It is a problem, and the question is, can you manage it as you go along? And I'm very close to having knees replaced at this point in time. I got to have it done at some point, but I'm postponing it and I'm postponing it. You know, because it's not my career anymore to be able to play. I just want to be able to lead a healthy life. That's what I mean. But you're absolutely right. I just want to leave with one thought, if I may, because it is so important for young people, just like you all, to dream and to dream big. Dream big. Dream absolutely huge. And just because someone tells you you can't do something, doesn't mean you can't do it. I'm the perfect example of the entire city telling my parents that I would not be good at anything. And it was only their effort of not knowing what the future held. Today you know where you can go in tennis, you know where you can go in cricket.
There was a reason that you had to get
young people, just like you all, to dream and to dream big. Dream big. Dream absolutely huge. And just because someone tells you you can't do something, doesn't mean you can't do it. I'm the perfect example of the entire city telling my parents that I would not be good at anything. And it was only their effort of not knowing what the future held. Today you know where you can go in tennis, you know where you can go in cricket.
There was a reason that you had to get into tennis. Maybe you can also...
Because of health. I was ill as a child and my lungs were not doing very well, and so I had to play an outdoor sport to be able to go to school. And that's how I got into tennis, and my parents didn't want me to be left behind. So it was a very, very tall order. But one of the programs that I did for television many years ago, not that many years ago, a few years ago, was doing interviews with people from around the world who had achieved something that made it interesting for me to listen to, so it could translate to the audience. And so I interviewed a wide variety of people across the world in a variety of spheres, from business to acting to music to food to fashion, from Cindy Crawford to Sharon Stone to Michael Douglas to Donald Trump to Wolfgang Puck, to a variety of people across the international sphere in different walks of life. But the one person who struck out for me was interviewing a person by the name of Buzz Aldrin, who was the second man on the moon after Neil Armstrong. So I went to his home to interview him. With a friend of mine, I looked around his house. There had all kinds of accolades from Columbia and Enterprise and NASA and the Medal of Honor from the presidents and all of these various things. That was amazing, the shuttle and everything else that he had models of in his house. But then way in the corner, he had this one little plaque that actually resonated with me more than anything else. And on that plaque was a little saying that he had, and it was hidden in the back. And it comes from really all of us growing up, and our parents telling us, do your homework, sky is the limit. Eat your vegetables, sky is the limit. Go play out in the park, sky is the limit. You have great talent, don't waste your talent. Work at it, sky is the limit. Everything, sky is the limit. So I saw this little plaque on the side in this guy's house that said, Who said sky is the limit when I left my footprints on the moon? So when I asked him about it, he said exactly that. He said, unless you truly aim for the impossible, and this guy was not even qualified to be an astronaut. And he went on to the moon 22 minutes after Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon. So when I got a chance to meet these people, they are able to tell you things that push them beyond the limit, to be able to achieve a dream that people thought was not possible to achieve. So I always recommend it to, especially young people, that it is so impossible to push yourself beyond the limit because you really don't know how good you are till you ask for the impossible. I'll leave you with that thought.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amirtharaj.
Thank you, Arun. Enjoy it.
That was a wonderful session, but we're not done yet. I have a few more things for you.
Okay.
We had a very nice interaction, a wide array of points that we spoke about. Completely appreciate your patience and like your answers as well. This brings us to the end of the first part of our session, and the second part of our session is something that I've not told you. So that's, we generally have it as a secret.
Oh.
So this is called the rapid fire round, where I will give you 5 words, and we would like to hear from you what are your thoughts for each word, the immediate thoughts that you get for each word.
I don't think he knows Karan Johar, right? just through that in.
There was something that I heard of KWK or something like that.
What is that?
Coffee with Karan. All right. So shall we start?
Go ahead.
You don't have to worry. This is not going to.
I'll try.
This is not going to embarrass you in any way. So 5 words. The first word is tennis.
Tennis. Gift.
Second is movies.
Dream.
The third is passion.
In me.
Fourth is God.
Everything.
Last night, Ms. Amirtharaj and I were at the same table at dinner, and I brought my food and I was getting ready to eat, and he was sitting back, leaning and not eating. And then I decided to look up at him, and I found that he was praying. He was thanking God, and I said, "So you do this for every breakfast, lunch, and dinner?" And he said, "Yes, I do that. That's something that's very, very important. Thanking for what we have in front of us. That's something that we all have to be able to appreciate." The last word, Ms. Amirtharaj, is charity.
The motto of our charity is "in giving we receive," for the simple reason that there is no greater gift, I think, than to be able to give. And it can be giving anything. Most important of all is time. And I think I was very fortunate that I had 2 people who brought me up, that their only goal in life was to be able to give. And that turned me into who I am today. And it's very difficult to not have that instilled in you morning, noon, and night automatically. It's in your head. And even to this day, after both my parents are sadly not with us now, that they speak to me every day to be able to maintain that relevant thought process and see if it can be translated to our next generation as well. Because at the end of the day, as I've often said, if you don't know where you came from, you will never know where you're going. So I just think that if you grow up with that and it's inbuilt in you because of the DNA and the place you came from, hopefully it will stand you in good stead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amirtharaj. Very nice answer. We have 2 more things for you. The first is as part of the newness, if I might say, of the SICCI 360 series. We would like you to kindly autograph your photograph so that we can keep this with our memorabilia. This is 2 photographs of Mr. Amirtharaj that we would like you to kindly autograph and also affix today's date to it. 25th August. Yes. The medication is in place?
It's in place.
Thank you very, very much. Let me show this for the audience benefit. There's one more thing that we would like to give you. As a token of our appreciation of you having joined us today, we would like to give you this certificate. There is what is known as the Kanchi Kamakoti Child Trust Hospital, which is in Nungambakam. And this hospital has been providing service at very low rates to children from underprivileged families. And this is across specialities. So we have taken the liberty to contribute in your name to the hospital so that it can take care of underprivileged child's medical expenses. So this is the certificate from the hospital for that. We would like to hand this over to you. I'd like to take a few moments to thank for today's session Mr. Vijay Shankar, Deputy Chairman of the Sanmar Group and Executive Committee member of SICCI. We appreciate his efforts for today. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank for today's session the SICCI 360 committee that has assisted in putting this very good series together. Without this committee's efforts, we would not have been able to get to 23 sessions, and our 24th session, which is our second anniversary, has also been scheduled. This committee is led by Mrs. Valli Arun, President of the Valingara Group and Trustee of the Tamalisai Sangam. Professor T. Murugavel is the co-chair of this committee. He's head of the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at SPC Chennai. Professor Murugavel is in charge of doing the required research work into each of our guests and providing the list of discussion points. Of course, Mr. Vinod Solomon as well does a good amount of work in coming up with the points associated with this. Mr. Gokul Santana, who is a Senior Vice President at Emphasis, he is responsible for the marketing, collateral marketing efforts of the SICCI 360 program. Mr. Amalan Nalavanda, who is an environment consultant at the Asian Development Bank, is in charge of our online moderation session. Ms. Vilasini M. Arun is a student of clinical psychology. Of course, Mr. Vinod Solomon, he is the secretary of SICCI that I mentioned to you about, who plays a role in terms of coming up with the required research work on each of our guests. And Mrs. Bhavani Srinivasan, who is Assistant Secretary SICCI. Again, I'd like to appreciate the efforts of this committee, without whose efforts we would not have been able to get here. I'd like you to join me in giving them a round of applause. I'd also like to share with you that the next SICCI 360 program, SICCI 360, has been scheduled with another Mr. Vijay. This is Mr. Vijay Iyengar. He's owner, founder and MD of a company by the name of AgroCorp International Private Limited in Singapore. This is a $3 billion company focused on agricultural products. They not only grow their products, they are involved with processing and growing agricultural produce and food processing across the world. He's also been doing a lot of work between India and the rest of the world as well. This program is scheduled for 10:30 a.m. of IST on Thursday, September 22nd. It's going to be held online over our WebEx platform. So we would like you to kindly mark your dates and join us for this program as well. That brings us to the end of today's SICCI 360 series. Thank you very much again, Mr. Vijay Amirtharaj, for joining us today. And we would like to thank each one of you, the audience, for also having joined us this evening. We hope that you have also found it useful in participating along with us. Kindly join us as well for tea and snacks that's served immediately after this program. Thank you again. Nandri, Vanakkam.